what if the secret to a stronger relationship isn't blind trust, but actually treating your love life like a bureaucratic project management board?
Yeah, which sounds completely counterintuitive, right?
Right. Today, we are looking at the messy, highly structured, and I think deeply misunderstood world of non-monogamy. Because, you know, the cultural narrative usually paints open relationships as these chaotic, hedonistic free-for-alls.
Oh, absolutely. Just people abandoning commitment entirely.
Exactly. But if you actually look at the mechanics of how these partnerships survive,
Hmm.
you find a level of explicit boundary setting and, well, emotional regulation that would make a corporate logistics manager sweat.
It really does. It completely flips the script on what we assume about romance. And our mission with this deep dive isn't to judge or advocate for a specific lifestyle, right? We're just trying to bypass those stereotypes and look under the hood.
Yeah, just to see how it all works.
Right. So for you listening, whether you are trying to understand a friend's dynamic or you're just endlessly curious about human psychology, or maybe even questioning the default settings of your own relationship boundaries, we are analyzing the actual engine of non-monogamy today.
We have a really dense stack of material to get through.
We do.
We're looking at clinical insights from couples therapists, and there's this really fascinating psychological research project from Roskilde University, or RUC, that specifically focuses on jealousy and love.
Yeah, that paper is incredible.
It really is. And we're also contrasting that academic theory with raw, real-life anecdotes from relationship forums. Because to even begin understanding the rules of this world, we have to kind of throw out the idea that open relationship is a single one-size-fits-all definition.
Oh, definitely. It's not just one thing.
Right. Reading through the psychological literature, the foundational concept is that non-monogamy exists on this massive spectrum. And the core dividing line, it seems to be the separation of physical intimacy from emotional commitment.
Yeah, that is the crucial distinction the sources establish right away. So on one end of the spectrum, you have sexual openness.
Okay.
This is a framework where a couple maintains a singular primary romantic connection. Like they're building a life together, but they have mutually agreed to allow external sexual partners.
So the feelings stay at home.
Exactly. The emotional weight, the love, the shared future, all of that stays entirely inside the primary relationship, while the physical novelty happens elsewhere.
Which is very different from polyamory. I mean, polyamory literally translates to many loves.
Right.
And that is where the emotional exclusivity is just removed entirely. People are forming deep, romantic, and mental commitments to multiple partners simultaneously. They aren't just sharing their bodies. They're sharing their hearts, their time, their emotional bandwidth.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It really is. And the specific configurations the forums describe within polyamory are incredibly complex.
How do you mean?
Well, take kitchen table poly, for example.
Oh, right.
It's exactly what it sounds like. All the different partners, they're metamors, which is the term for your partner's partner. They all know each other.
Wow.
Yeah. They get along, and they might literally hang out drinking coffee at the same kitchen table. The whole relationship is treated as this communal ecosystem.
Which requires so much emotional maturity.
A staggering amount, yeah. To sit across from the person your partner also loves without feeling threatened.
Well, contract that with what the sources call parallel poly.
Oh, okay, what's that?
It operates on a completely different psychological premise. So in a parallel setup, a person has multiple romantic relationships, but those individual relationships never intersect.
Oh, so they're kept totally separate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The partners run on parallel tracks. They don't hang out. They might purposefully choose not to hear details about each other. It sort of compartmentalizes the emotional labor.
That makes sense. And then you have the V relationship, which functions essentially like a hinge.
Right, the V shape.
Yeah, one person sits at the bottom point of the V,
Yeah.
deeply involved with two separate people at the top, but those two people at the top have absolutely no romantic involvement with one another.
Right.
But okay, let's unpack this, because going through the case studies, there was one specific configuration that made me physically stop reading.
I think I know which one you're going to say.
The unilateral open relationship.
Yes.
This is a dynamic where only one partner is allowed to seek outside connections, while the other remains strictly monogamous. And look, I have to push back on this.
Go for it.
On paper, a unilateral open relationship sounds like a dressed-up excuse for exploitation, or just an officially sanctioned way to cheat.
Well, what's fascinating here is how the clinical literature actually differentiates those behaviors.
Okay.
It fundamentally comes down to the mechanics of deception. Cheating is defined psychologically by a breach of trust, secrecy, and really the removal of the partner's agency. A unilateral, open relationship, when it's functioning healthily, is built on the absolute opposite. It relies on enthusiastic, continuous consent.
I understand the consent piece in theory,
Yeah.
but why would a monogamous person ever agree to sit at home while their partner dates someone else? Like, what is the psychological incentive there?
Well, the therapists in our sources outline several highly practical scenarios where this happens. Often, it is a pragmatic solution to a biological or psychological mismatch.
Like what?
Consider a couple dealing with vastly mismatched libidos after 20 years of marriage. Perhaps one partner identifies as asexual, or due to medical reasons, they simply lose all interest in physical intimacy.
Ah, I see.
Right. They still fiercely love their spouse. They want to stay married, but they also want their partner to experience physical fulfillment.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. And another common scenario documented in the forums involves a heterosexual marriage where one partner realizes later in life that they want to explore a same-sex connection, but neither partner wants to dismantle their deeply loving family unit to allow for that.
Wow. Okay, but the crucial caveat the therapists add is that this dynamic only works if the power structure remains balanced.
Absolutely.
The golden rule for a unilateral setup is reversibility. The monogamous partner must have the undisputed power to close the relationship at any time.
Right. They have to be able to hit the brakes.
Exactly. If they begin to feel insecure or exploited, they pull the plug. It cannot be coerced under the threat of divorce. And that constant negotiation of power brings us to the operational reality of these lifestyles.
Which is intense.
Super intense. If a couple is going to introduce this level of external risk, how do they govern themselves to avoid complete emotional devastation?
By relying on intense, almost rigid frameworks. Like you said earlier, the stereotype assumes these relationships reject all rules.
Right, the free-for-all.
Yeah, but the clinical reality shows that successful non-monogamy requires far more bureaucratic boundary setting than standard monogamy. The couples who survive this don't just rely on good vibes, they create systems.
And one of the most effective systems highlighted in the therapy texts is the traffic light method.
Oh, I love this concept.
Me too. It is a philosophy of decomposing and distilling abstract jealousy into actionable rules. So, in the red zone, you establish the hard nose.
The absolute deal breakers.
Exactly. These are actions that will blow up the relationship. A frequent red zone rule in the forums was prohibiting any external partner from sleeping in the shared marital bed. That physical space is sanctified.
Yeah, you don't cross that line.
Or instituting a complete ban on dating mutual friends and coworkers to prevent social fallout.
Right, and then you move into the yellow zone, which handles the messy middle ground.
The tricky stuff.
Yeah. These are actions requiring explicit pre-approval before they happen. So a couple might agree that going on dates is fine, but only on weeknights, reserving the weekend entirely for the primary relationship.
Oh, that's smart.
Or they might place certain highly intimate sexual acts in the yellow zone, requiring a discussion before introducing them to an outside partner. It forces a pause button on impulsivity.
Leaving the green zone as pre-approved freedom. Actions that require zero check-ins because the boundary is already stress-tested.
Exactly.
I was reading this and thinking, this is literally just project management applied to human intimacy.
It really is.
When you feel a massive, overwhelming wave of anxiety, it triggers your amygdala, your brain's fear center. But by decomposing that massive anxiety into a traffic light protocol, you are forcing your brain to move the processing from the emotional limbic system into the logical prefrontal cortex. You're soothing your own nervous system with bureaucracy.
That psychological shift is exactly why the traffic light system works. You are replacing unpredictable threats with predictable data.
Wow.
And the most vital piece of data in these frameworks is safety. The texts emphasize a concept known as the lowest hanging fruit rule.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the entire relationship can only move at the speed of the most insecure or hesitant partner. If one person is ready to sprint into the green zone, but the other is terrified of leaving the yellow zone, the relationship stays in the yellow. You do not drag a partner into emotional waters they don't know how to swim in.
That makes perfect sense because emotional safety is inextricably linked to physical safety.
Absolutely.
The sources note that safe sex, mandatory testing, and brutal transparency about sexual health are universal, non-negotiable rules.
Yeah, the fastest way to destroy trust isn't just a bruised ego, it's physically endangering your partner.
Exactly. But beyond physical safety, there's the sheer effort required to prevent the primary partner from feeling replaced. There was a highly memorable anecdote from a forum user named Brian in New Orleans.
Oh, I remember Brian's post.
Yeah, he pointed out that society conditions us to feel like we only have value if we are the only one. To combat that feeling of being undermined, he and his primary partner schedule what they call love moons.
Taking the concept of a honeymoon and miniaturizing it to constantly reinforce the primary bond.
Precisely. They plan these highly intentional, dedicated trips where they entirely unplug from their secondary relationships.
No texting the other partners.
None. They buy each other specific gifts. They hyper-focus on their original connection to reassure the primary partner that they remain the absolute priority.
It is a deliberate strategy to outmaneuver our own biology. Because a traffic light spreadsheet and a weekend love moon are fantastic tools, but human beings are still animals.
Right.
Eventually, the protocols are going to clash with our primal wiring.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because you can color code your boundaries all day, but what happens when the green-eyed monster inevitably kicks down the door?
Oh, it will happen.
The RUC research paper spends a significant amount of time analyzing the root cause of jealousy. And the academic debate here is incredibly tense.
Yeah, the paper dissects two deeply opposing views on human nature. First, it presents the evolutionary psychology perspective, championed by researchers like Thomas Mayland and Michael Price.
Okay, what do they argue?
They argue that humans are fundamentally biologically wired for monogamy to protect our genetic legacy.
The survival of the species kind of thing.
Exactly. In our ancestral environment, a male needed absolute certainty that his partner's offspring was actually his to justify expending energy to protect it. A female needed certainty that the male wouldn't divert his resources and protection to a rival mate, leaving her and her child vulnerable.
Wow.
So in this view, jealousy isn't a toxic character flaw. It is a vital biological alarm bell designed to ensure our evolutionary survival.
So under that theory, non-monogamy is essentially fighting millions of years of genetic programming.
Pretty much.
But then the paper introduces psychologist Ingjold Nissen, who completely rejects that premise.
Yeah, he takes a totally different angle.
Nissen argues that absolute monogamy isn't biological at all. It is a cultural institution. It's a social system forced upon humanity during the agricultural revolution.
Right, when property became a thing.
Exactly. When we started owning land and passing down property, society needed a way to dictate inheritance, which meant tightly controlling female sexuality. Nissen suggests our natural pre-agricultural state was much closer to non-monogamy, and we are only conditioned to feel jealous because society trains us to view our partners as personal property.
It is a profound clash between nature and nurture. But what the clinical therapists focus on is the practical reality.
Which is?
Regardless of whether jealousy is a genetic survival tool or a byproduct of agricultural property laws, the physical sensation of jealousy is undeniably real.
Right, you still feel it in your chest.
Exactly. The paradigm shift required to survive an open relationship is changing how you react to that sensation. In standard monogamous culture, jealousy is often wielded as a weapon to control a partner, or it's hidden away in deep shame because it feels like a failure.
Like you're a bad partner for feeling jealous.
Right. But in the non-monogamy texts, jealousy is treated merely as a check engine light on a dashboard.
It doesn't mean the car is totaled. It just means a specific wire needs checking. Maybe a boundary was crossed, or maybe a partner just needs more reassurance this week.
Exactly.
And successfully decoupling jealousy from shame is what allows people to reach what is undeniably the most mind-bending psychological concept in this entire deep dive.
The concept of compersion.
Yes. The RUC paper references the Danish term medglade, which beautifully translates to co-joy.
Co-joy. I love that.
Compersion is the profound, active feeling of joy and excitement a person experiences from seeing their partner blossom in the light of a new romantic or sexual relationship with someone else.
It is the absolute antithesis of jealousy. Instead of your amygdala firing off threat signals because your partner is happy with a rival, your brain literally rewards you for their happiness.
To put that into a framework for you listening, imagine your absolute best friend calls you to say they just got a massive promotion at work.
You'd be thrilled.
Right. You don't feel threatened by their success. You don't feel like their new salary diminishes your bank account. You are just overwhelmingly, unselfishly thrilled for them. Now, try to imagine taking that exact same unselfish co-joy and applying it to your partner coming home and telling you they just had an incredible romantic evening with another person.
Achieving that state requires a monumental rewiring of adult attachment
I
styles.
can't even imagine.
To truly feel compersion, an individual has to be so deeply rooted in their own self-worth and so unshakably secure in their partner's devotion that the presence of an outside lover doesn't trigger their fear of abandonment.
Wow.
The forum anecdotes reveal that compersion rarely happens naturally. It is a skill that takes years of agonizing practice, constant self-reflection, and an ironclad sense of self-esteem.
Which naturally leads me to ask, who can actually survive this?
It's a fair question.
Because if rewiring your brain to feel compersion takes years and mapping out a traffic light system requires immense logistical effort, what kind of foundation do you need before you even try?
You need a fortress.
Right. If a couple is stuck in a deep, miserable rut, maybe they've hit that roommate phase the texts talk about, where they haven't been intimate in months, is opening the relationship a viable shock paddles approach to reviving a dead marriage?
Every single clinical source is completely emphatic on this point. Absolutely not.
Not at all.
No. Using non-monogamy to fix a broken relationship is like trying to fix a leaky roof by removing the load-bearing walls. It will only accelerate the collapse. Opening a relationship acts as a massive magnifying glass on a couple's existing communication flaws.
If you lack the tools to calmly discuss who is doing the laundry without spiraling into a defensive screaming match, you are categorically unequipped to discuss your partner managing the emotional needs of a new lover.
The texts synthesize a very specific profile for the couples who succeed. First, they possess a solid, pre-existing baseline of unconditional love and deep empathy.
Okay.
Second, they have immense individual self-esteem. They do not use their partner as a crutch for their own validation.
That's huge.
And third, and perhaps most importantly, they have the stamina for the sheer exhaustion of continuous communication.
The exhaustion element is so prevalent in the forums. There are numerous accounts of people who actually quit open relationships. And not because they suffered from debilitating jealousy, but simply because the lifestyle resulted in severe burnout.
It's just so much work.
Balancing the emotional needs of multiple partners, agonizing over shared calendars, continuously negotiating yellow zone boundaries, it felt like working a grueling second job.
Yeah.
One user described the endless cycle of managing dating apps while maintaining a primary household as caress shopping, which means boyfriend or girlfriend shopping, and admitted the logistical labor just wasn't worth the romantic payoff.
It highlights a hidden advantage of traditional monogamy that we rarely acknowledge.
What's that?
Monogamy, despite its own high failure rates, offers a societal default setting. The script is already written. The boundaries are generally understood without needing a spreadsheet. Non-monogamy forces you to pave the road entirely from scratch while you are driving on it every single day.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and look at the whole picture, from the RUCE research on evolutionary alarm bells to the traffic light logistics of forum users, open relationships are clearly not an excuse to dodge commitment or an escape hatch for a dying marriage.
Not even close.
They are an immensely complex, highly demanding architectural structure. Ironically, to successfully navigate an open relationship, a couple actually needs more radical honesty, more self-awareness, and a higher capacity for emotional regulation than the average monogamous setup requires.
And that is why examining the mechanics of non-monogamy is so incredibly valuable, regardless of your personal lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Analyzing how these couples dismantle their own jealousy and painstakingly build their boundaries forces all of us to hold a mirror up to why we love the way we do. Are our boundaries intentional, or are they just inherited defaults? Are we communicating out of genuine, raw connection, or simply out of comfortable habit?
And that brings me to a final thought for you to carry with you. Even if you are 100% monogamous and you have absolutely zero desire to ever open your relationship, ask yourself this. What if you applied the mechanics of non-monogamy to your monogamous life?
Oh, I love this question.
If you stopped assuming you knew your partner's boundaries and actually mapped out your own explicit traffic light system, if you committed to celebrating your partner's individual, non-romantic growth with that same unselfish, radical compersion, if you communicated with that level of intense, terrifying honesty with your single partner, how much stronger could your relationship become?